Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everyone. I think this might be the biggest week of the year for Mercury. Mercury is going through an opposition to Saturn, an opposition to Neptune, trines to Uranus and Pluto, all within the span of a couple of days. And then after that transition, Mercury becomes the ruler of a solar eclipse that's happening at the end of the week. So I'm going to map all of that out for you today. We'll, of course, be looking at it as the week goes on. I'll give you some horoscopes for the mutable signs to start this week, but we will have more horoscopes later in the week. Also tell you what's on my altar today. So lots of good stuff here. I'll give you 5 things to watch for this major sequence that Mercury is going through, and we'll sort of map it out big picture today. So anyway, that's our agenda for today. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. It helps us grow tremendously when you give us that thumbs up, drop a comment, join the channel as a subscriber, community member. All of that really does support us quite a bit. You can find transcripts of any of my daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. And when you go over there, a couple of promotions that I want to run by you. I'm realizing that I need to pull up my website here. First of all, I will say that our year 1 program that begins again in November, we have 2 cohorts every year. The November cohort is now open for enrollment. So if you go to courses, click on first year course. I will be telling you more about the course and as the week goes on. So it starts on November 8th. This is our first year course in ancient Hellenistic astrology. You want to study with us in a fantastic webinar-based program. Everything's recorded for you so you can attend live or follow along at your own pace. We go through a full year of study together, lots of amazing content, live clients, live readings, and the early bird rate is now open as well. We also have need-based tuition. There will be an informational video that I will start running either later this week or next at the end of every day's content. If you want to stick around and learn more about the program, there'll be some information there for you so you can learn about it and see if it's good fit for you or not. The other things that I want to turn you on to, go to the Immersive retreat. We're taking a retreat for a brand new training program on divinatory astrology called the Oracle Within next June. The early bird rate lasts until the first week in October, so check that out. Also, live talks this month. I'm giving a talk on Mercury's many faces. This is a first in a series of talks I'm giving on pairing the planets. And if you've never learned this, don't sleep on this series, because this is all about the philosophical first principles, or the archai of the planets from the ancient Greek philosophical perspective. Pairing the planets as first principles is how you generate all of the lists. And this will teach you how to pair planets in your own birth chart or in charts if you're reading for other people. So really, I can't encourage, if you've never learned planetary pairings from the ancient perspective, check this out. The first one will be on Mercury this month. If you can't attend any of these live, you always get the recording afterward. And then finally, in person, I want to turn you on to a fall equinox gathering that we're hosting. This is free, coming up on Saturday, September 20th here in Minneapolis. If you're in the area and you want to come hang out with us, we're going to have some meditation on the equinox, a time to have some movement and meditation in a group, and some community time, communion as well, I guess, with cookies and tea afterward. This is free to attend, just RSVP so we know you're coming. So that's all the news here, and more on all of those things as the week goes on. Okay, so on that note, let's take a look at the sequence of events that's happening this week. It really is a major week for Mercury. I do think it is the biggest week of the year for Mercury. Of course, that's subjective, but I'll tell you why I think that's the case. So we start off here on the 15th, Monday, and I want to walk you through the transitions of Mercury throughout the week. So it's really getting started on Wednesday of this week. The buildup is occurring between now and then, so you could be feeling any of this to start the week, but you'll really notice it on Wednesday when Mercury opposes Saturn. This is the beginning of Mercury's major sequence. So we get a Mercury in Virgo opposing Saturn in Pisces, and that is coming just days before an eclipse that will also oppose Saturn. There's a kind of echo during the eclipse of the recent opposition from Mercury to Saturn that will be present in the eclipse while Mercury is still ruling the eclipse. On the 18th, the very next day, Mercury will then go through an opposition with Neptune. As Mercury crosses into Libra, Mercury will oppose Neptune in the sign of Aries. So that opposition to Neptune occurs the very next day. So we have opposition to Saturn followed by opposition to Neptune, and they're in different signs. So they're going to be a slightly different feel to those two oppositions. The very next day, on the 19th, this is Friday of this week, we will then see Mercury go through the trines to Uranus and Pluto. And this is early in the morning, Thursday into Friday, 18th into the 19th, that the trines to Mercury, from Mercury to Pluto and Uranus, will occur. Now, one other little tidbit, we're going to cover this later in the week. On the 20th, actually, another sneaky little aspect this week, Mercury ruled as well, with Mercury and Venus in mutual reception now, because Mercury will be in Libra, which is Venus's sign, while Venus has moved into Virgo, which is Mercury's sign. Venus will square Uranus. So we have a Venus-Uranus square that is taking place by Saturday, September 20th, with Venus and Mercury in a mutual reception, and Mercury ruling both Venus and Uranus as they square, having just completed this major sequence of events. As if that's not enough, right? Huge week, right? And then on the 21st, Sunday, to close out the week, we get a solar eclipse in Virgo with the South Node, and that solar eclipse is happening almost exactly opposite to Saturn. The opposition from the Sun to Saturn will pass just prior to the actual eclipse, but there it is. So this is one of the bigger weeks of our year. Eclipse week is always a big week in terms of some of the more significant astrological symbolism that we see in the sky. But the fact that it's host, Mercury, the host, where it's at, what it's doing, the host of an eclipse, always really important, okay? And the fact that it's going through so much this week should really give us pause. We should really be looking at this as an interconnected sequence of events. So given that Mercury is going to oppose Saturn, then Neptune, trine Uranus and Pluto, what ways can we think about that? So I've got 5 things for you to watch for. After I do this, I'll tell you what angular houses are getting hit for which signs by the eclipse in Virgo. And again, we'll do horoscopes more later in the week. I'll tell you what's on my altar as well for this week. All right, so here are 5 things to watch for given this overall sequence that Mercury is going through. Keep in mind that all of these are meant to capture something of the totality of the sequence, including Mercury's very interesting rulership over the solar eclipse. Number 1 on my list would be facing and overcoming, you could think about it in both ways, cognitive, intellectual, or technical limits. The reason for this is that Mercury in Virgo, a very strong placement, is running up against oppositions to Saturn and Neptune. That may, for Mercury, come up as some kind of mental, cognitive, intellectual facing of a limit or something that opposes or blocks. Oppositions are often experienced like that, or that's one way that we can describe what a planet, if we could put ourselves in the position of the planet and the archetype that it represents, what does it feel like when it goes through an opposition to another planet? It will often feel as though it is facing something that opposes it. And for Mercury opposite Saturn, that could be various mental, intellectual, communicative, technological limitations. Now, the limiting factor is often part of a creative process. This is important because all oppositions are of the nature of Saturn, and all oppositions create a kind of binary or tension that can actually be very creative. In fact, in Greek philosophy, that was underlying the way that ancient mystics thought about oppositions and polarization between things. They believed that the tension of opposites, although it could be potentially destructive, could also be creative. So we may be facing some kind of limit that feels destructive and limiting, and that maybe tears down something that you've been building, or temporarily prohibits, delays, blocks, restricts something. And that something would be mercurial. So that's why we think of mental, cognitive, intellectual, technological, communicative kinds of things feeling limited, blocked, or stifled. However, the tension of the opposites can also create an opportunity for creativity, innovation, problem solving. And so, especially given that right after these oppositions occur, there are trines to Uranus and Pluto in an airy kind of grand air trine that gets created between Mercury in Libra, Uranus in Gemini, and Pluto in Aquarius. that grand air trine coming right off the oppositions could suggest that where there's an initial block, that like oppositions creating the potential for innovation or creativity, that we find some innovative solution or some workaround for whatever initial limit we face. So this would be one way of thinking about it. Where there are blocks and limitations, there comes an opening for innovation and problem solving and new ideas that can carry us beyond the temporary or initial feeling of prohibition or limitation that we experience. All right, number 2, articulating non-ordinary states of consciousness. One of the interesting things that happens when you put Saturn and Neptune together, because they're just a couple degrees apart, even though they're across the sign boundary, especially outer planets don't always really care so much about sign boundaries compared to the way we think about planets in the traditional Hellenistic way. Anyway, the point is that when those two planets, when something like Mercury runs through an opposition to Saturn and Neptune and they are conjoined, we might be talking about the mind's challenge, let's call it a challenge, of articulating, conveying, cognizing, communicating, understanding something that is not ordinary, like a mystical state of consciousness, for example. How do you put into words some of the things that you realize or see or intuit or understand in deeper states of prayer or meditation? For thousands of years, that's been the work of poets, or that's been the work of, contemplatives and mystics to try to convey something non-ordinary, or artists to try to convey feelings that are often very complicated. And if you were to describe them in normal intellectual language, that things might seem unclear or contradictory or incoherent. And so sometimes it takes music or poetry, or it takes the paradoxes of mysticism. A Zen koan, for example, will often capture something of the essence of a Mercury opposite Saturn dilemma, or Mercury opposite Saturn Neptune kind of dilemma. It's as though we are sometimes required to adopt a different form of consciousness, the kind of consciousness that thinks in terms of riddles and paradoxes. Yeah, might sound a little weird, but it's true. Like things that are not, they feel somehow like they're beyond ordinary logic. I would say, for example, that one of the hardest things to do for astrologers is to capture or convey what astrology is. And one of the things I'm very passionate about is saying that, look, it's not a science. It's not a testable kind of thing. Not in any normal empirical sense, until we do more to understand the entire the epistemology of the planet's divinatory traditions in a much broader, more comprehensive manner. We're not going to get close to trying to understand what astrology is, or certainly not to test it, right? So this is the kind of thing that may show up, where things that are not irrational, but they're not traditionally rational either, may have to, they may need to speak. They may need to be given voice. This is the same thing when you have a week where dreams are speaking, and there's maybe a number of synchronicities occurring, and you have to be with the right kind of people to convey those things without feeling like it's exhausting and you feel misunderstood. Like if you're with the wrong people and you try to convey a week of dreams, omens, and symbols flashing all around you, popping like popcorn, it's just one of those weeks. Like it's very uncomfortable if you're not with the right people to try and talk about those things. And so some of those struggles and challenges, as well as the joy and thrill of the mind being in touch with a non-ordinary form of knowing or communicating. All right, well, number 3 for me is a difficult shift of perception prompted by difficult messages or communication. Look, sometimes we get feedback, we get a message, we have a conversation, and that conversation challenges us to think differently, to speak differently, to perceive something in a way that we weren't perceiving it. And so one blessing of this will be the way that our mind is opened because of a piece of information that comes our way, a message that we receive, a piece of news, an insight, just even like a piece of gossip we receive. Oh, did you hear about this? Oh, whoa. So having to adjust our thinking, our mind, our paradigm, our perceptual reality to accommodate for news or information that is surprising and that is not in line with our habits of thought or perception. So I would watch for that this week, this opportunity perhaps. And if it's not happening in you, there's nothing wrong. You may notice it happening in the life of a coworker, or you may notice it happening. I mean, keep your eyes open for how this may be appearing in the lives of people around you, or even in the ideas that you're entertaining about something that may seem very mundane, like how you're going about a work project. There could just be a difficult but necessary encounter with something that you have to think about it differently, and it's very mundane. So a lot of times we miss these things because the way we convey them as astrologers makes you feel like you're supposed to have these earth-shattering revelations, and sometimes it's just the subtle little shifts within some area of life that to us on the outside it feels mundane. It's not like feeling like a particularly spiritual part of our lives, right? But this is how we spiritualize those parts of our lives, by bringing subtle little perceptions like these of patterns into them. Number 4 would be flooding, forgiving, surrendering, trusting, accepting. When the mind of Mercury is flooded by Saturn, Neptune in an opposition, and then opened to the vastness of Pluto and Aquarius, or the quicksilver other-mindedness of Uranus and Gemini, you have to think, this is a week where the rational mind may feel overwhelmed, flooded, and may be asked to do something very difficult, like set aside the accounting books where we weigh and balance and discern and discriminate, and sort of forgive, surrender, trust, accept. That's not easy for the rational mind. It's like that's not its job. And yet we're asking it somehow to, take on a different role. I think of it like this: when, and I'm in the process of parenting, there are moments where I need to model, healthy decision making and, rationality. Like, here's how to think through this. Here's how to make a choice and weigh the different factors involved in how you're doing something. And then there are times where, and any parent knows this, you have to, even though there's an opportunity for teaching some in a moment about being more rational, thinking through things more, you need to let big feelings exist. You need to just let your kids feel whatever they're feeling. We need to do that for ourselves sometimes too. Could this be an opportunity to actually become smarter, more interesting, and more innovative in our thinking, because we started with allowing ourselves to feel and then let the thinking follow the feeling, as opposed to the other way around, where we try to mediate or direct how we ought to feel based on something that's sort of preemptively rational. I could see it flipping in this situation. Now, the other thing we could say in general is just the tension between the rational and the emotional, the sort of otherworldly, intuitive, synchronistic, acausal, quantum mechanical, the synchronicities, and something a little bit more discerning. I always joke that I've never been a like, oh, the clock's at 11:11 kind of person. Like, I don't know. It's just not, I mean, if people around me are that way, it's never like bothered me, but I just don't. Yeah, I don't look for like numbers on clocks, for example. Other synchronicities, sure, but I've just never been like a number on a clock kind of person. And sometimes I'll be with people, and because I've been with a lot of, mystical personalities over a lot of years of doing this, a lot of people who are interested in mysticism, I can always feel the difference in my body. I can always feel the difference when I'm with someone who it feels like, I don't know if any of these are really signs, that I think you might just be addicted to noticing patterns. And that to me is distinctly different from being with someone who points out a sign. I can feel it. Even though I'm not a number person, I swear to God, I'll be with someone, they'll notice a number somewhere, and it will feel distinctly different from someone who feels like they're white knuckled, constantly looking for numbers. I'm being a little cynical, but my point is that there may be tension in general this week between almost like a confirmation bias and like, we in divinatory mystical traditions have to be very careful of the fact that there is something like confirmation bias at the exact same time that there actually is something like an oracle speaking. And knowing the difference really comes down to okay, is this thing speaking? Like I saw a crow on my walk, and it landed right in front of me. Okay, great. Now, let's really feel into this. Is this speaking? Okay, it is. Wow. And then it comes up in a dream. And then maybe little by little, I have a feeling of something that it has said, right? Whereas sometimes on a walk, the crow lands and, I go, is it saying something? Oh, no, it's not. Okay, it was nice to see a crow though. You know what I mean? So how can we pair that kind of discerning, rational listening, space holding, but like discerning quality amidst a reality that's also teeming with magic? You know what I mean? Like the two things don't have to be opposed; they can complement one another. And so, one of the things that I was taught by some of my teachers, some of the I would cite, for example, the time that I got to spend with Jeffrey Cornelius, who wrote The Moment of Astrology, one of the greatest books in modern astrology, in my opinion, talking about what is astrology. It's just kind of making the case that it's always been a different way of knowing. It's always been a form of divination. Well, within that paradigm, you don't just throw out logos. You don't throw out Hermes, who is, by the way, associated with logos, the word, the reason, the understanding, the intelligence, the logic, the intelligibility that can be articulated. It's intelligence. Well, if nature is intelligent, right, then we also have to bring intelligence to bear on how we interact with the nature of the cosmos. So you can't just throw Hermes out for the sake of being mystical and intuitive. But at the same time, you lean on Hermes too much. It's all craft, it's all technique, it's all logic, it's all rationality. And that's typically where astrologers then bite on some stupid temptation. Why don't you give us a test that we can use to test astrology, to test astrologers? And we go, oh, yes, I can come up with a good test because this is totally rational. It's like that almost always fails and makes us look bad because we're leaning too much on Mercury and not recognizing that the logos is usually in service of an oracle that is speaking. And so trying to capture that in tests never works for this exact same reason. But anyway, this conversation is all emblematic of the tensions between Hermes Mercury and Neptune Saturn this week. So, but think about the opportunity to allow for flooding, forgiving, surrendering, trusting, accepting as an option this week, in addition to trying to control everything mentally or rationally. Number 5 would be a learning that leads to an eclipsing. This is the way, I guess, that we could summarize all of it, which is just to say, hey, there might be a sense that this entire sequence is leading to a very powerful genesis or new beginning. At the end of the week, we have a solar eclipse opposite that same Saturn, opposite that same Neptune. And that solar eclipse is ruled by Mercury, who just went through it all. So what does that mean? Well, I would say that what we learn and see from this archetypal combination this week is part and parcel of the planting of a new synodic cycle from the sun and moon that is not just a regular lunar cycle, but one that sets the tone for 9 years, for 18 years, 18 to 19, right? The full length of a nodal cycle. These solar eclipses that occur during, the portion of the year when the new moons form around the north or south node, they are like a new moon that has a gravitas that will spread out through many, many years of our life. Sometimes that's very subtly. Sometimes it's in big, huge ways. Often depends on kind of where it's happening in your chart, what it's touching, and what other transits are happening and so forth. But even for someone who doesn't have a particularly active eclipse right now in their chart, this is still something that has the power to speak and tell a story over a much longer period of time in our life. So the point is that all of these sequences that we're going through this week from Mercury are going to have a direct impact on the seed of the new moon solar eclipse, which opens new doors, starts new beginnings. So it's the starting point of a new karmic cycle in life. That's the gist of it. What we learn, what we open ourselves to, what we let go of on the level of mind or cognition or perception, what we allow of a paradigm of thought or intellect to be changed or opened, what we accept and allow to come in emotionally, the impact that we allow the impact that we allow events and people to have on us, not just mentally, but emotionally this week at the same time. The stretches that we try to make intellectually, paradigmatically, perceptually, all of those things can lend themselves to a very deep and maybe fruitful new beginning of some kind. We're going to look at what that might entail later in the week when we study this upcoming eclipse. We're going to do some horoscopes for it, of course. We'll have all the things. But today, just prepping for the eclipse, knowing that this sequence of Mercury is going right into the seeds of the new cycle. So that is it for our like kind of the formal content today. I want to do a few more things, starting with I'm going to put the eclipse up on the screen, and I just want to demo for you guys. So these are the, oh, you know what? Let's go like this. So these are your, I'm going to do some brief horoscopic reminders for the double-bodied or mutable signs. The eclipse is falling in an angular house if you are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces rising. Let's just briefly review what that might mean. These are the most powerful houses being activated this week in the eclipse for the mutable signs. So if you're a Gemini, this new cycle is taking place in the fourth house of home and family. Roots, the private or interior sphere of life, family karma, ancestors, land, living environment. Those are the kinds of things you want to keep in mind for the solar eclipse coming up. Now, if I rotate this forward, next mutable sign, angular, is going to be Virgo rising. You're getting this in your first house, identity, health, body, the physical nature, psychological nature, the themes like individuation, individuality, getting a clearer, deeper sense of who I am, feeling good and healthy about who I am, taking care of my body, mind, and health, getting down to more of the core features that make me, me. This eclipse can really lend itself to those things, but sometimes there has to be like a separating of what's real from what's not. And also who we are in relation to other people will be a real part of this for Virgos. Then we go to Sagittarians. Sagittarians, you get this eclipse in your 10th house, career, vocation. You get this in the place that connects you to the world, to your work, to the hustle and grind of earning a living and developing a reputation, developing skills and mastery, maybe the workplace environment in general, or whatever connects you to the civic society in which you live, even if you're retired. Finally, for Pisceans, this is going to land in that 7th house. And the eclipse in the 7th for you will be about shifts and changes in relationships, in the give and take of pleasure, in intimacy, in things that are reaching some place of finality or conclusion. This is the place of the setting sun. And also anything that has to do with the interpersonal mirroring others provide us with. Which is an important part of our relationships. We're here to enjoy people, to love people, to connect, to bond, but also other people provide us with deep insight about who we are and who we aren't. So those are just reminders for the double-bodied signs. Like I said, we'll do horoscopes on the eclipse for all signs later in the week. You guys know on Mondays I like to cover whatever signs are receiving the transits in the angular positions. I'm going to show you what's on my altar to wrap things up. So let me just shift my camera's view. So right here, you will see that there is a bunny on my altar. This is kind of a sad story, but my daughter, for her birthday, we decided we would foster a bunny. And she has the moon in Pisces in her chart, and she got that lunar eclipse happened to fall on her moon in Pisces. And the foster bunny that we adopted unfortunately passed. And this was really my young daughter's first experience of loss. There was a lot of, let's call it learning, death and mortality. And there was a lot of pain for a little 7-year-old to lose a bunny and to feel also like, did I do something wrong? Was this my fault? Did I let the bunny down? And we've had a unique parenting challenge in front of us to say, well, let's reflect on this. What could we have done better? I think there are some things, although I do not believe it was her fault or our fault, but it's like, let's reflect on it. Let's learn from what happened. And let's also surrender and trust and accept that things happen as they do for reasons that are hard to understand. Death is natural. Death, it's just like, it's just like a tough situation. So I have the bunny on my altar this week, just as a way of keeping my daughter and the loss of this little pet present this week, really asking for guidance so that I can be a positive presence for my daughter as she's kind of having her first experience of loss. To me, this is a natural, easy thing to do. If you have an altar, if you don't have an altar, I highly recommend developing an altar practice because it's just so simple. This is a week for me where I can connect everything I'm doing to a process that's happening in my life that I'm trying to hold space for, as a parent. And every week it's a little bit different, but you can always find interesting ways of connecting what you're living through in life to your connection with divinity, just like, hey, help me stay connected here. So that's what's on my altar this week. And next week we have, as the week goes on, there's just going to be a ton of content. We're going to be unpacking some of this with Mercury, really looking at the solar eclipse coming up in Virgo, looking at that Venus-Uranus square that's coming up from Virgo to Gemini. Like, this is a packed week, huge week for Mercury. So hopefully we've at least started off on the right foot. And like I said, later in the week, there will be an informational video about the year 1 course that'll be tagged on, or either that or next week. So we'll see when I get that made. But don't forget the fall equinox event coming up in Minneapolis. Would love to see you here. Come out and meditate with us. Come out, hang, have some community time, set some intentions for the fall. I think this will be a really nice way of doing things. Don't forget my Mercury talk this month as well. Hope to see you guys soon. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. This is our first year course in Hellenistic astrology, and it begins again this November. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the course, the format of the course, and how to register. So let's go ahead and get into it. What is this course about? Well, if you are not familiar, ancient Hellenistic astrology is the earliest and original form of horoscopic astrology. All of the subsequent forms and schools of astrology that have existed over thousands of years come from these philosophical and theoretical roots. And so what you're doing when you study Hellenistic astrology is you're going back to understand the why behind absolutely everything. Why were there ever such a thing as houses and signs in the first place? How were the planets ever assigned to rule various portions of the zodiac in the first place? How do you use the categories of essential dignity, and why were they ever created in the first place? If you're someone like me, you like to know the why behind things, because once you understand the why, then you know how to use things more intuitively. So really the point of Hellenistic astrology, in my opinion, is not so much about going back and becoming a traditional astrologer or just being traditional for the sake of being traditional, as much as it is about grasping the roots of the entire system and paradigm. When you understand those roots, you have more intuition and understanding, which allow for you to be much more artful and fluid in the way that you speak the language of astrology. We call this class Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic because while it is about going back to understand the philosophical, theoretical, technical roots of the tradition, it's also about fluidly bridging those things with modern astrology and all of its most unique contributions. For example, modern astrology has given us so much psychological depth and personal depth. And so in a modern astrological setting, you're going to get the ability to explore your own character, your own psychology, and you're going to be able to utilize astrology for a process of healing and personal transformation. But when you pair that with ancient astrology, and it's almost like predictive karmic analytics, you really have a full toolkit to work with. And so that's also a great mission of ours at Nightlight, is to bridge ancient and modern forms, which is why we call the program Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. So that's just a little kind of overview of the program. If you want to know more about the specifics of the curriculum and of the the syllabus, what I encourage you to do is go over to nightlightastrology.com, click on the courses page, go to the first year course, scroll down, and you'll see this over 12 months you'll learn about. And here you're going to see more of a detailed breakdown of the curriculum itself. I can promise you that if you've studied astrology in modern context, but you've never gone back to the ancient roots, while some of these topics may look familiar to you and you go, oh, I've already learned about that. Unless you've studied them from the Hellenistic perspective, I guarantee that you are not going to be familiar with this content. Hellenistic astrology is mind-blowingly new and interesting for most people. And if you've never studied it, again, don't assume that anything on this list is something you're going to be familiar with. In that way, the program is really ideal for a variety of different people, and I'll say more about that in a second. So what is the format of the course? Let's go to that next. Scroll down and you're going to see that the course includes 30 online webinars that I lead throughout the year. Over the course of a year together, I have 30 classes that are broken into different units of material. In between those classes, we have breakout study sessions with your course director and 2 TAs. They're going to lead you through Q&A sessions and tutoring sessions to make sure that you have a lot of support in between major units of study. In addition, we also have an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions year-round and get an answer within a business day in the student forum, where a lot of people also connect and build community. Lots of people in that forum also develop like little meetup groups outside of class. That's very common in all of our programs. It's a very community-loving, warm space where anyone's also welcome. Throughout the course, you're also going to find that for every lesson, if you're just there as a hobby student, you can just listen to the webinars. They're all recorded for you. So if you can't make the live webinars, everything is housed on the website as recordings. I'd say about 40 or 50% of our students are going to be following along at their own pace, whereas the other half might be attending the live webinars. But it's really kind of, if you can attend a few and then 1 week you got to be gone, the recordings are always there. You have lifetime access to everything in the course, so it's not a big deal. For every lesson as well, if you're someone who wants to go really, really deep, maybe you have the intention to practice professionally, this course is set up with an optional certification exam at the end from our school, from our program. So you can, if you want to build that resume and develop the credentials from our programs, you can do that, but it's optional, so you don't have to. And outside of every lesson, we have recommended reading. We have supplemental bonus content, all of which is optional, but it's there for people who might want a lot more, whereas some people will take the webinars themselves, and that'll be plenty. So it's really flexible in that way. Also, this is one program within 4 years of curriculum that are meant to go together. And so most people who come through our first year program will end up taking our second year program, where we develop forecasting and prediction and transit tracking techniques. Our third year program, which is aimed at counseling and psychology, so psychological counseling skills, is our third year program. And then the Oracle Within, which is our exploration of the philosophical, spiritual roots of the divinatory oracular tradition of astrology. So there's a lot of material there. We also have another 1 year program in horary astrology for some people who want to add that predictive tool to their toolkit. So there's just a lot of material at Nightlight that this class is actually just one part of, which can be taken standalone, or for some people, they get into it, they're going to love it. You're going to hang out with us for 3 or 4 years worth of content. This program is ideal for a number of different types of students of astrology. I'll say that for starters. So let's see here. I'll stop sharing this. So we have there's a profile of the typical students who come through our courses. One is going to be people who just want a very guided introduction to ancient astrology because you've never had it before. Maybe you're only familiar with modern, and you want that guided, structured approach to learning traditional for the first time. Also, people who are brand new to astrology in general, there's no better place to start than at the roots of the ancient foundations. So whether you're a total beginner or just a beginner to Hellenistic, this is a great place to start. If you are someone who's been around astrology for a long time, but you've never had a guided, structured approach to Hellenistic astrology, again, this is a great place to start. I promise you, Hellenistic is very different than what you're familiar with, and you're going to need a guided and structured approach at some point in time. I also think for people who are looking for a lineage, which means not just a bunch of information, but a practitioner-specific based approach where you get to see a practitioner work with clients. You get to hear how a practitioner has prioritized different techniques and why. You're going to get a structured, spiritually grounded focus at Nightlight as well, where if you're looking for someone who practices astrology, but also values grounded everyday spiritual practice, that's Nightlight. If you want a community that's been in the industry for a long time now, this is our 16th year of teaching programs and guiding students through trainings. So all of those things, if they matter to you, this is a great place to study. It's a warm community atmosphere. It's spiritually grounded. It's focused. It's academically rigorous. It's going to provide you the appropriate preparation for practicing professionally, especially if you go through all of our programs. But also for those who are just curious and love astrology for your own personal interests, this is going to be a great place for you to learn and grow and thrive and feel like you have a lot of support around you in the curriculum, the teachers, the community, as you're developing, what might just be a personal interest or spiritual hobby. So that is who it's ideal for. Finally, how you register. You go over to the website. I'm going to take you back there. And it's at the bottom of the first year page. You're going to find that the early bird rate is in effect until October 24th. You can save significantly off the cost of the course when you use the early bird rate, where you can pay in full, or use an early bird installment rate plan. Both are going to save you off significantly off the cost of the course. But also at Nightlight, it has always been our mission to make sure that astrological education is accessible for everyone. So please, if you are someone who would love to take this course, but maybe you could only afford a small amount of tuition per month, use the tuition assistance. It is there. All you got to do is plot, you fill out the little form, you tell us your situation. If you're on a fixed income, if you're on a limited income, if you're part-time, if you're in between jobs, if you don't make a lot and you're on that fixed budget, we understand. We don't want people to hurt themselves trying to study something that is spiritual that we feel should be very accessible for everybody. So if you're someone who could use a little help to make this program happen, for whatever reason, maybe you're a single parent or you're on disability or you're retired or you're on a fixed income, whatever the case is, use that tuition assistance. Also, people in other countries who have extreme, exchange rates. We get it. So just use the tuition assistance and we'll be glad to make sure that the price point is accessible. For us, as a spiritual topic, we're a business at the end of the day, but we believe that this is a spiritual topic. And so accessibility has been a part of our model for 16 years now. We've never not had one of our training programs with affordable sliding scale-based prices for people who need it. So please take advantage of that. It's all there for you. I hope to see you in classes soon. And if you have any questions about the program whatsoever, direct them to us at info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope to see you all coming up here in November. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.